you get your podcast. you know how powerful this is? Do you know what it means in your life? Or maybe I should ask the question, does it mean anything in your life? Until you learn how to study it, see what God is saying to you, you'll never really be able to fulfill your purpose. Come on and join us. Join us for 45 minutes of purpose here at 45th Street Baptist Church. I guarantee you, you'll come out thinking differently. And my prayer is, somewhere along the line, you'll find the purpose that God has for you. Come on in and join us.
Welcome to 45 Minutes of Purpose with Reverend Andra D. Sparks.
Well, good evening, everyone. We are back again. We thank God for your presence with us today. We thank Him for allowing you to reach this point in the day, and we pray that what happens right now is going to absolutely be a blessing. We are actually in the phase part 2 of a conversation we've been having with Dr. Jeffrey, with Dr. Jeffrey Moore, who is a, let me see how I can put this properly. He is a licensed professional counselor supervisor. So he supervises other folks, but he also serves as a clinical director for the Jefferson County school system for helping all our young folk over there. And I'm so thankful that he's in that space. Last week, we had a great conversation about mental health and about how one of the programs that Dr. Moore is well respected for in our community is a program entitled Brother Let's Talk. Brother Let's Talk. And so we asked him if he would come back this week and do just that, just have a conversation with several of our brothers. So tonight we've got a couple of brothers for him to talk to, and I guess if you include me in the mix, that's about 3 of us to talk to. But we got our own Reverend Casanova Briscoe, who's going to join in the conversation, and we've got our own Deacon Alvin Langham, who's going to be a part of the conversation as well. And I'm so thankful that we're here. So welcome back, Dr. Moore.
I'm glad to be back. How you doing, Reverend Sparks? Good to be here.
Glad to be here, brother. I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you do what you do.
Okay. I'm going to kind of set up the stage for everyone. And fellas who's on this Zoom, I'm going to speak to you briefly so you can kind of come on at any time. But as Reverend said, you know, I'm co-founder with other gentlemen, executive director, let me get his name right. I have multiple different people actually. And we got a psychiatrist, psychologist, myself, and other people. But just to kind of get it back on track, let me kind of explain to you where Brother Let's Talk kind of originated. You know, I've been doing therapy for a while, and I realized that a lot of our Black men don't come to counseling until they're either forced to come through the courts or their wife or their girlfriend forces them to. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Like, you know, we have cameras around our office, and we have men that get scheduled, and they'll ride around the building multiple times, pull up in the building, like attempt to get out, and they won't get out. So it's a huge stigma when it comes to mental health. But let me kind of just frame it just to give you guys a little idea about mental health as far as Black men is concerned. And I want everyone, and this is the time I want all the men to come in because I want to ask you a question. I want some feedback if you don't mind. Think about the men in your life, whether it's a father figure, whether it's your father, whether it's your uncle, or whether it was anybody in your male that was in your life that raised you that was significant. Think about when was the first time that you saw them cry? Like really cry.
That's I don't know if I ever saw my daddy cry.
Anybody else?
The one who raised me. Cass and Alvin, can y'all camera on and talk to us, please?
Well, think about this though.
I don't know. I know I never saw I think I saw my grandfather cry once. If I recall seeing him cry at my mother's funeral.
Yeah. And I share this story publicly. The only 2 times that I saw my father cry, and when his mother died, which is my grandmother, he was sharing tears, and obviously he was crying. And the second time was when he was transitioning. I was holding him in my arms, and he was obviously nervous because he was in the process of transition, and he shared a tear. And what I realized is throughout this whole process, a lot of men don't have experiences with having other men showing emotions appropriately. And the reason why, and I kind of thought about this over a period of time and kind of understanding what that was, because I remember when I was younger and I was being raised by the men, and I did start to cry because I fell off my bike or so on. The first thing they would say is like, "Boy, get it together. You don't cry. What look, you know?" So I remember the earlier programming of why, and I remember why my father was doing that, because he knew at some point I would become a man, and he wanted to make sure that as I'm dealing with adversity as an adult, that I would be able to man up. So what he was trying to teach me was what a strong man looked like. And so he was making sure that he instilled that in me. But what he didn't teach me is how to deal with my emotions when I was depressed, how to express my emotions appropriately. Because most of the time when we do express our emotions, we express it in anger, we express it in multiple different ways, but not necessarily in an appropriate way. So what I realized is, and it wasn't any fault of them, because I'm sure at that time they maybe had therapy where they could have gone and talked about it. But at that time they were in survival mode, Reverend Sparty. So when you're in survival mode,
Correct.
You're just processing the situation you're going. So, and with the programming that you had, you learn to man up. But what you didn't learn how to do is deal with depression. But what I did realize is, just being a psychologist and understanding how things work, is that he probably did cry. I just never saw him, because I'm sure with some of the things that I know he experienced, I'm sure he had several moments of that. But what he didn't show me how he dealt with it in certain ways. And I know we got a couple of men that's joined us, but has any man here saw that father figure, a man shed a tear? Or cry? I mean, cry. I know a tear, but I'm saying cry.
Well, I know I never had enough time spent with my dad to ever see that. And then when you talk about just regular men, I got older brothers. No, it was just something that we just didn't do, and I can pretty much say probably till today still don't do. We just deal with it. I don't think that is something that, as you were saying, we was ever taught, or to a certain point just looked at things as being a part of life and trying to move on. It was just something that I can truly tell you, I just never saw my dad cry.
Yeah, and you would think as simple as showing emotions that we could identify with that part, but unfortunately, like I said, a lot of men who raised us, and I'm gonna speak to us because I'm sure a lot of people are listening, but a lot of the men that raised us, they were in survival mode, and I'm sure they endured pain. Because think about this. Let's go back historically and think about the men who came here as slaves, like during the Middle Passage. Think about the man who got on that boat. That in that passage, they were next to other men who were dying, feces on themselves. I mean, think about you as a man and that thing. So I tell people all the time, the man that got on that boat was a different man that came off that boat. And so what do you think all of that pain and processing, everything that they endured in that passage to be enslaved and then come here and be treated that way, what do you think all that energy and pain went to?
It probably turned into rage.
Exactly. And over a period of time, and I know y'all heard this word before, this is what we call generational trauma. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I also been doing research at UAB for the last 20 years as well. And one of the studies one of my colleagues does is, and I'm gonna just make it real brief. We study rats. We have 2 species of rats, 20 apiece. And the reason why we use rats because their generational cycle is very quick. They have kids with offsprings within a couple of weeks, months, and then another offspring. So we wanted to replicate what we were doing. So you had 20 different species of rat and 2 different species. We would put them together and we would force them to fight. We would agitate them and we would spray a perfume in order for them to kind of associate the smell with fighting. So eventually we conditioned them. So we would put them together and spray the perfume and they would fight. And so we realized that all we had to do is put the 2 species together, spray the perfume, and they would fight because we conditioned them. So we separated the 2 species for a significant amount of time until they had offspring. And so we waited till the offsprings were a certain age, and we put the offsprings that never met each other into a cage.
Wow.
We sprayed their perfume, and guess what the rats did?
They fought.
They fought. So generational trauma can get transferred whether you know it or not, because all of that transferred into the man who raised you from the man who raised him, or the lack of the man that raised him. And so what you're dealing with is a lot of generational things. That's where, some of the PTSD and the thing. And so your body, even though you didn't live in that time, your body senses that. It has what we call muscle memory. That's where PTSD comes. So, like, for example, I had a car accident one time when it was raining. I was riding with my cousin. And so obviously I survived it. But later on, as it started to rain, I started to shake a little bit, like I had to slow down. And it wasn't because I was at a threat, but my body remembered that accident during that rain, and it associated that moment with maybe I'm in danger. Because when you're in survival mode, you go into what we call, brothers, and I'm talking to you, you go into what we call a fight or flight or freeze mode. Because when you experience the trauma, you're gonna fight, you're gonna flight, or you're gonna freeze. And that is your natural way as a man in order to protect yourself from dying. Because if it was that traumatic, you wouldn't be here. So by the mere fact that you're here and through your lineage, that means that you are one of the species who survived it. But in turn, just like you can transfer healing, you can also transfer trauma. And so even though you're not experiencing what your forefathers experienced, your body still has it in your DNA, some of the unresolved issues that they had that they didn't resolve that transferred to you. Because I know we all had conversations with some of the women in our life, and when we started to do things that they didn't like, they would tell us, oh, that you acting just like your dad. So that means that they saw something in you that they didn't like in your father, and you start exhibiting it, whether your father taught you or not.
Same characteristics.
We have some predisposition to some behaviors.
Exactly.
Environment creates other problems for them.
And environment creates. And so what we have, fellas, is we have an overload of stimuli that we're fighting. And now what we just think about all the attributes that we have as men. But what our fathers taught us was to be a provider and a protector. And we probably very good at doing that. So that's what we do with our families. That's what we do with our women, the best that we know how. But we hadn't been taught how that trauma affects us and how we deal with our emotions. And that's why most of the time when we get inundated with a variety of different feelings, it manifests itself through anger. It manifests itself through depression. And we don't know why we're feeling that way, because we're in survival mode and we're trying to absorb all the feelings without really trying to feel it, but we feel it. And it manifests itself in addictions. And our coping skills, what we use a lot of times are alcohol, drugs, food, sex. And so what we do is we go to those things as comfort. And then in that process of going to those coping skills, we create other demons that really overshadow what the real core issue that we had in the first place. because we haven't learned how to tap into some of the other hundreds of attributes as a man, because how we were programmed to define the man was the provider and the protector. But we also have the same emotions as a woman does. They have the same emotions as us. It's just how they process that through their mindset. But we're processing through a whole bunch of generational trauma. And then going to what Reverend Sparks said, and then we go into society and have additional traumas. The environment we were in, the how we are viewed as, and then we started to absorb some of those things. And then with the media and certain things. And so what I want to profess to us is like, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's interesting because I don't know many brothers at all that do not have daddy issues, man. They have issues with their father figure.
Exactly.
Almost to a person. And do we turn around and blame dad for the issues that have been?
No, and see, this is where the healing comes in, brother. This is my personal opinion, because I see a lot of clients. We are one of the first generations, and I'm talking about us. I don't know our age, but we are the first generation that has the opportunity to begin the healing process. It's
Right.
not like our fathers could not do it. It was just that, and maybe it was available, but they were in survival mode. Now you have people like me who are educated, people are talking about mental health. So now it is help out there. So now we have an opportunity, and I'm talking to everybody that's listening, we have an opportunity as men. If we are the first generation that can start the process of the healing, let's do that. Because as I mentioned, the generational things that has transferred to you that your father couldn't break, your father's father couldn't break, and your father's fathers couldn't break, at some point, whether we get it or not, we might be transferring that same energy to our kids. And at some point, somebody has to start the healing process. Because if you stay in survival mode, you're just gonna be absorbing all of that energy and that pain, and eventually it manifests. It's like a balloon. Eventually, you call that internalized pain. So we're suffering in silence. And then other men support other men by saying, stay strong. And that's just a mantra to keep you in that same pattern of not addressing the pain that really goes on. And it manifests that, and I'm gonna be honest, because anybody who knows me, and we have been emotionally, physically, sexually abusing the women in our lives, and we don't realize it. And the women has been holding us together, not holding us together strong, but they have been holding our family together strong. Because
it's interesting, Doc. We got some questions coming.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we got Casanova and Alvin on here. Reason, because both of them are raising a house full of boys. Both of them have nothing but boys in their family. So to me, they seem to be perfectly suited to get this message tonight, and that's just coincidental. How do we avoid transferring this kind of trauma that we've experienced to the next generation?
Well, historically, fellas, and I don't know how you were raised, but we were taught to keep our secrets in the house. We don't share our secrets, and we all probably have family secrets, curses, or whatever. And this is the time that we need to be honest with ourselves, you know. And if you had a father, and not everybody had this situation, but you know, we've seen men who get glorified by having multiple houses, multiple women, and then you grow up and you might say, well, I'm not going to be like my dad because my dad wasn't in my life, and then we grow up and be just like him, indirectly. And unfortunately, that's where we need to start the healing process of addressing and being honest with ourselves and being honest with the women in our lives that we have affected in order. And that's why I want to give kudos to the women, because they have really been holding the family down as we deal with our addictions, as we deal with all these things, as we've been going through it. So what we have to do is not only start the healing process, but we got to be honest with ourselves. And that's why we do the Brother Let's Talk, because we can have open discussions where just men we're having beta males, alpha males, and we're all discussing things that we all go through. And let me give you a real example, fellas. And I know we got women listening too. But think about the time when you had one of your homeboys, whether his wife or his girlfriend left him or he found out she was cheating, and then he called you and said, "Hey man, let's go out, man. You know, I want to hang out and get some girls, man. So many girls, I'm gonna leave her behind and I can get girls." And he go out and he overdrank, and you could tell that he's hurt. And you tell that he overindulged in what he does. And then when you drop him off at home after you just try to get his spirits together, you know, he goes right in the house and get in the fetal position and cry his heart out. Because what he's showing around us is that he's strong and he can deal with what has thrown his way, and he don't want to show other people his vulnerability. And we don't want to show our women our vulnerability because we feel like they're going to look at us as we're weak. And that's not necessarily true, because they're trying to tap into that part of our vulnerability that allows us to be all of a man, not just part of a man. So we have to be honest with that part first and then start the healing process. So what are y'all thoughts, fellas? I know we got multiple men on here. Give me your perspective as you're living it, not as I'm saying it, but as you're living it.
Well, I'm a little different. I'll admit that I didn't have knew my dad, my mom, come from mom and dad divorced. I was in the first grade, so it was pretty much I was just like my mom to my dad, and when I was around my mom, I was just like my dad, and so it was a little strange for me. But having 4 boys and being a counselor at the Salvation Army for over 25 years, I'm dealing with, as I counsel the men with past trauma, PTSD. Basically, I have to deal with them to the point of they're stuck. It's like being stuck in the mud and spinning your wheels. And the thing is trying to get them that lifeline to get out and let them know they don't have to fix everything. I think that's one of the biggest things in being a man is that we supposed to have the answers. We supposed to be able to fix it. We supposed to even be able to heal it, but don't know how. And so that's the biggest thing. And with my guys, when I tell them, man, this PTSD, they first thing they think that's taboo. Man, I ain't got no mental illness. And so what I have to let them know, you dealing with post-trauma that's so stressing you out so bad that it's affecting your daily living. And from there, they seem to they come around and begin to want to talk, because it's deep. But I guess crying, my boys ain't never seen me cry. I can't even remember the last time I did cry. Being raised by my mom, this subject is pretty tough, because you as a man, you supposed to be tough. That's the only thing that I knew. Tough, smart. My mom got 3 older boys, 2 younger girls, so this is how she raised us. And so I can't know nothing else but to try to be a little bit more understanding to my kids. And I ain't against them crying. I tell them that if they gotta cry, they can cry. I do tell them, don't get it out, because we got to deal with it once it's done. So it's
So the thing of it is, and that's important what you said, and I appreciate you, my brother, for even sharing that, because it's personal, and you were honest and brave enough to even share that. But then as you're teaching them how to be a man, you also need to teach them how to process their emotions and their feelings appropriately, and it's okay to do that. But what happens is it's very difficult to teach your kids something that you don't know how to do yourself.
That's right.
So you're saying, and we all had this conversation with a parent or adult, do as I say and not as I do. And the generation that we're dealing with now are so transparent, and they can see past that. They can say, well, he's teaching me right, but he's not able to show me how to do that, because he don't know how to do it himself. And so it makes it difficult for them to be able to process appropriately, because we don't know how to teach them that, because it's a thin line for us being able to show our weakness and be able to still be a strong man at the same time in our head.
Or being in denial that we have a weakness. Look, let's be honest. The whole point is, it's like, where am I weak at?
Yeah.
You know, ain't that I ain't afraid to cry. We'll cry for, I guess, who we choose to cry for. Friends that we grew up with, people that we know, we'll cry for. But if it's grandmama, we cry at grandmama. We cry over women. Let's put it that way. We'll cry
with our woman.
Yeah, but
we'll cry with our woman. But that's I tell anybody, you found a hard brother, and I tell you, he ain't with his woman.
For sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Them the only ones we will cry around with our woman. But other than that, nobody else we won't. You know, we'll be there for other people crying, but for us, it's just being honest. It's like, hey, you know, hey, I can only do that when I'm with my wife.
And so what happens?
Safe space. Why is that a safe space though?
Yeah.
Question. Why is that a safe space?
She my wife. She the one that I trust. She's the one that I feel that I don't have to be as strong around. You know, that I can be me around. Because when I'm around other people, then it's like, okay, I guess I'm like my guys at work. I ain't trying to get caught slipping because you don't know what's gonna happen. So I gotta be about business. But when I'm with her, I can simply be me.
Was that the two words, Dr. Moore?
What?
Trust and vulnerability.
That's it.
Somebody, and I can be vulnerable with her.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly, that you can be vulnerable with, because that's because, and I want to share something with you for y'all who have PTSD, whether you've been diagnosed with it or not, is that when you suffer trauma, and I know y'all know this, but I'm gonna just remind you guys, and if you don't know, this is gonna be some fairly new information. When you suffer trauma, you actually have a physical effect that's in your brain that happens, an actual physical effect. And there's other psychologists who do brain studies where they take pictures of your brain as you go through life, and after a trauma, it's actually a physical effect in your brain that transforms it. So not only are we dealing with it from a psychological standpoint, you're having physical effects of this trauma. And without an appropriate way of allowing your body to process it and have a release from it, it's just like a compound physical effect that's coming. Because what happens is when you experience another situation, you're not experiencing it from a perspective of just a normal person. You're experiencing from a trauma perspective. And so you bring that with you. And that's where some of the women meet us broken. They meet us broken, and we stay broken, not because we want to stay broken, it's because we need to be able, like you said, my brother, to be honest and be able to address those issues that we dealt with. Because what I would tell you is this: if you think of, and I want you to think about it without saying it, think of the most severe traumatic experience you've had in the last 10 years. Just think about it in your head right now. And think about whatever age you were when that trauma happened. And then I want to ask you where you are now in your life. Where do you think that man went that didn't get help for that? Where do you think he went? He's still there. And so when that person that had that trauma gets triggered again, you're going to have what we call a trauma response, and you're going to address that new issue from that trauma response perspective, right, because you are still that person with that unresolved issue.
Right. And I deal with that because they always say I'm healed, I'm all right. But it's not, because when you set a trigger, when that stimuli hits them, it comes back.
In ways that traumatized person that you just remembered, that person comes back to life. And the person that you were talking to at the time or dealing with, thinking they're dealing with the current person, but they're actually dealing with the trauma person who showed back up. And then you get to get that smoke. And then you're dealing with that anger. You're dealing with that pain. You're dealing with that. And I'll give you a prime example. In 2019, I lost my father. I lost 5 people who were close to me within a back-to-back situation.
Mhm.
I was out in somewhere, and I think a brother was going through something, and he, you know how brother just kind of, he didn't try me, but he was in a little mode, and then he came back with the normal response, what? And then it triggered me, right? And so at that moment, I thought, and I caught myself, and I ran back to the office, and I just let it out, and I had other women who know me, and they were like, what's going on? What happened? What happened? Because what that person was about to get was a whole bunch of pain. It wasn't going to even be me.
Yeah.
And so I knew,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, he don't even know what I'm really going through. He about to get the pain of my father. He about to get the pain of my like I had all that in me, and I knew then I was going to be out of control because he was fighting me. He was fighting that pain, and that pain going to win every time. And so then that's what us brothers, we get in those situations a lot of times where we end up in an altercation where we're doing something to another man or a man doing something to us, and then we both lose. We all lose because we're fighting each other's pain. That's why when a brother looks at you, the first thing you're gonna say, "What you looking at?" Because you think that brother sees you, meaning he sees
the real you,
the real
you,
not the one in the suit, not the one all made up, but it's a person inside of him that you don't want to mess with, because he gonna give it all he got. He gonna probably take it to death the way he feels about it. But I know that person will be a loose cannon. And
how likely is a brother to have genuine relationships with people until he resolves that trauma?
Well, what happens is, like I said, because that man or you or whoever it is always looking at it through that trauma perspective. You're not leaving that trauma behind. You're like, hey, that was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But when the women deal with us, they're dealing with that person that's broken too. And at some point, she might trigger you. So it might not be what she tries to trigger you. She might tap on that person and kick them a little bit.
Correct.
And she might not try to do it. She might not even know she's doing it. But when she starts tapping on that person, or them, like I told you, 2019, and you start waking up that man, at some point, what that man gonna do? Is he gonna show his head?
Oh yeah. I've had this conversation with Casanova before, and I think I remember this conversation pretty in depth. And I don't know if I've ever had it with Alvin, but I can confess here that I think some of us deal with the idea of rejection because we weren't raised by our natural father, our biological father, and the feeling of rejection goes somewhere. I mean, I don't,
Well, I'm gonna explain to you from a psychological perspective. Is one of many different perspectives, but I'm gonna share a perspective that might share light in that expression. Now, I know a lot of people grew up with their fathers absent. A lot of people grew up with their fathers there, but still absent. He was physically there, but he was absent. So any way you look at it, they grew up without a father. You might physically know him, but you didn't know him. And what happens is, and I'm gonna be honest with you, because we've been doing a lot of group discussions for a while, and I'll be honest with you. A lot of men spend their whole life waiting for their father's validation that they never get. Yeah. All they need is their father to come up to you. I'm talking to you, Casanova, and you, Reverend Spark, for that person to just hug you and say, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Never had that. I can tell you, never had that.
No, I got that. I got that.
I never had that. When my dad, and I guess when I was telling Sparks,
Alvin, you got to jump in here now.
So traumatized.
Okay, well,
go ahead, Al.
Okay, well, I didn't have that experience either. You know, my father is, I'm going to be uh, light when I say this, is not a cool guy, not a good person. And I was, you know, my mentality about him was I wish he would go somewhere, perhaps fall off a cliff or something like that. I definitely didn't want him around me or his validation. He was the type of person that he would come around and try to cause a ruckus at our house. So my parents separated when I was about 12. And that was after we caught him cheating on my mother. My family actually caught him in broad daylight in our community shopping center with his girlfriend. And that was embarrassing for me. I know I can't imagine how my mother felt. So, you know, when they separated, he would just come around. He was in town, but he would come around to cause a ruckus and then leave because he didn't, my feeling about it is he didn't want my mother to be successful in raising us. He didn't want us to follow her good example. He basically wanted, I think what he wanted us to do was turn against her so that she couldn't have control of us. And I say that based on some of the things that he would tell me. He would tell me all the time, I'm 12 years old. He would say, you know, you're a man. You don't listen to anybody. You don't let anybody tell you what to do. And I always say, and I think that I was blessed with wisdom beyond my years because I knew then he was not telling me something that was good, something that was right. So I definitely, you know, don't feel that about my father. You know, I to this day, you know, the farther he is away from me, the better I feel about it. And that may not be the correct way to feel, but that's the way I feel.
Yeah, and you're definitely entitled to that feeling. But I want to share something with you as well. Is like even though you didn't want it from him because you were angry at him and you witnessed some situations where you probably looked at him in a different way after that experience, but it still doesn't mean that you didn't need it. And then you might not have wanted it from him, but you still need it. Let me explain to you what I mean when I say that. And I'm talking to all the brothers who listen or the brothers who's gonna listen to this. When was the first time you felt comfortable with another grown man telling you that they love you? That wasn't your father. Say, I love you, Sparks. I love you.
I'm good with it. I'm good with it. I express that all the time.
That's good. But think about it, Alvin, like how does that feel when another man tells you that?
I feel okay about it if it's somebody who I respect and I think they're being genuine about it. You know, my father would tell me, you know, there were sometimes he would say something like that, but I knew it wasn't true. His actions weren't consistent with that. From my perspective, all he wanted to do was gain my confidence, and so he could take advantage of me. He was that type. He's that type of man. So, but if I heard that from somebody who I believe means it genuinely, I feel good about it.
So do you think that anger that you had legitimately so for your father, how do you think that really did manifest in your life as you started living and just having relationships? How do you think that manifested itself, the anger and that stuff that you just expressed from your father? How did it manifest itself in real time?
It probably manifested itself from the perspective of a lack of trust. I'm not a very trusting person. It takes a while for me to trust somebody. Okay. So, you know, and I look at that as if I can't trust my father, the person who's supposed to raise me, look out for me, you know, who am I supposed to trust? Now that's not something I think about consciously, but you know, you ask me how I think it manifested. Yeah. I think perhaps that's one way it did. It's a lack of trust.
Yeah. And so fellas, that's one of the things I'm sharing. Like it having it or the lack of or the need and not being able to get it eventually manifests itself in certain kinds of ways. And if you haven't, and I'm talking for the brothers who haven't had the opportunity for the male figures in their life to tell them that they love them, they grow up and become men that can show women and other people, their kids, how to love, but they cannot receive it. You can show it, but it's hard for you to receive it. And
Amen.
Amen. And so at some point, regardless of how we were raised, some of the lack or maybe some of the brokenness of how we dealt with it. Maybe we're mad at our fathers, and we're mad at our fathers for not being there. We're mad at our fathers for what we saw them do. Eventually, it manifested, and we're carrying that because, and you know how this works. And I had clients similar to you, Alvin, and even though their father wasn't, they were mad at him. And I'll give you one particular situation. He had the same exact similar situation as you. His father got older in age, and he was, in this part of transition, he was sick, and that son went into his father and just told his father, "Hey, Dad, thank you for being a good man." And do you know, in that moment, the release left him and the father. So carrying it is rightfully so, but it's a part of it that carries with you, and the healing process might look different for everybody, but being able to say, hey, what did that man experience? Why was he out here having multiple engagements and cheating on your mom? And when you might get into the psychology of what he was dealing with, I don't think you will forgive him, but at some point, each other, you and him deserve peace. And obviously the anger is going to prevent you from getting to that point. But that's where healing looks like, is being able to free yourself and free. He might not deserve it like that, but let's just say whatever he was going through, because he might have been out there wilding out and he was doing stuff to your mom, and he might not even love himself.
So what you deal with when you're dealing with, I guess with me, the biggest thing was acceptance. Name being Casanova, all my other brothers and sisters got different names. So my whole life was, I either had to prove myself or whatever. And for the longest, it's been like that. And at times, it's still like that. You know, you tell a person your name, they don't believe you. I tell them all the time, nobody wanted to play with Casanova or and want to be your friend because your name was Casanova. So it was strange with me growing up, and with my dad being such a rolling stone, because he had 4 other families. Found out when he passed. We all showed up, met, we all stay in touch. But for us with me, that was the biggest thing. He never came to see me play a game. He came to my graduation. I ain't never forgot it. Gave me $100. I gave to my mama. And it was just crazy. Never saw nothing or anything. And so I don't know if it's a problem, because with me, everything that was done to me, I try my best. I do the opposite. You know, I've told Sparks and being married in a second, I never knew how bad I had it till I married the one that I'm married now. Because my whole thing has been to do right, but still find struggle in that. You know, sometimes seem like I ain't doing it good enough. However, so I don't know, but that's me. I'm a very transparent, straight up person.
But I would say, first of all, thank you for being transparent and being honest about that, because that really is the part of how this healing starts, is being transparent and being honest with that. And you mentioned the word acceptance, and how it manifests with you. Like, what I've noticed is, and this is information for you guys, is that when a young man or a man didn't have the acceptance of his father, he's going to end up to one extreme or the other extreme. He's going to be one of those brothers, like, I know how it felt not to have the acceptance of my dad, and when I have my sons, I'm gonna let them know. They kind of go not necessarily too far, but they go far because they're fighting that demon to make sure that they break that curse. And because it's almost like, well, I know what my dad did, and he's deceased, and I'm gonna make sure I'm not like him.
Right.
But in your pursuit of doing that, is a part of it that, and I'm gonna let Reverend Sparks speak on that, because we're going into his area. But it's a part of that that even your dad is not here. Even when my dad's transitioned before, I had to release him from whatever he was carrying so I could free myself. And I have a young son and I wanted to free him. I wanted to make sure I was free. So in that moment when the minute or 2 or 5 minutes before he transitioned, I was explaining to him that he could let that go because I forgive him and I appreciate what he did and all the things that he tried to do and all the things that he did. And I say, have peace with that because I forgave him. And in that moment, it freed both of us. And so even though your father is not here, it's a level of process, and maybe in therapy that you can go through that process still, and even though things were the way they were, you can still heal from that. Because even though you're moving on and you're dealing with your son, but a lot of that still needs to happen, even though it didn't happen, if it makes sense. Because we just go on and live our lives without ever getting that acceptance, but it does manifest itself some other way.
I've got two things about that I need to say. And first, we got some questions that have come from some listeners. One is, and be thinking about this, Dr. Moore. What can we do to encourage one another and promote going to seek some professional help? And how do you deal with the stigma that some people believe exists? Some might even suggest, I don't know that there's any kind of laws that prevent you, that give you cover for seeking mental health help. Some might suggest that there's some barriers to it, or is there something that prevents people from taking advantage of you seeking that help? Those are two questions that we have. But to these two brothers who I have an abiding faith and love for, I want to tell them that forgiveness that we talk about in scripture all the time is easier discussed than lived. All right. We talk about forgiveness in scripture, but we are directed in scripture to actually forgive people. All right. And it doesn't say where the barriers are to forgiveness. That includes our fathers. That includes our fathers, not just our enemies, but we also have to extend that forgiveness to people in our blood circle, our inner circle. And in this instance, we've got to draw the courage and strength to forgive those closest to us. And that would be in each of our situations, forgiving our fathers for not being a good father. For not being a good father, and being thankful for God's grace making up the difference in that space. Because even though the three of us struggle in having our biological fathers be good father figures, we have still had the benefit of other people stepping in and filling in some of those gaps. And so who are we to deny those men forgiveness when Jesus Christ forgave those who was killing him? So that's something we got to be mindful of, and it takes some prayer and some time and some patience, but don't exclude ourselves from the teaching that we give to everybody else all the time. You can't do that. But those questions are for you, Dr. Moore.
Okay, repeat the first one. I'm gonna hit them and then repeat the second.
Yeah, the first one is, how do we encourage one another to seek professional help?
Well, first of all, brothers, and I appreciate you. I know we're getting closer to the end.
Yeah, we got to get to the end of it.
Yeah, get to the end, but we gotta affirm each other and getting the help that they need. We gotta make it okay. But if I come to you and be like, man, I'm going to see my therapist, we gotta support that brother. We can't just sit back and be like, oh man, what you doing? You gotta make sure they make it cool. Like, congratulate, man, that's good, man. You're working on your demons, you're working on your issues, and you're working on your daddy issues, and support each other in that respect. Because the more and more we affirm and congratulate our brothers for getting the help that's needed, and the women going to congratulate it, it's going to be a whole different vibe that is going to be cool to go, because we're going to have a support, and it's not going to seem like like we going to the doctor's office and we have to wait until we almost about to fall over to walk in there. And then even at that, we don't want to get the help. And mental health services the same way. We got to make it okay to support each other and ourselves and going to get therapy. So that's the first thing we need to start doing it. And then the community will support us. And it'll almost be like, hey, brother, you ain't had a therapist. You struggling with something, you need to go talk to someone about that. So when you see the brother struggling, instead of just sitting there knowing he's struggling, whether he's strong or not, or he's the strongest man you know, you can just, and when he say, I don't need no help, man, I got this, you can try to support him like, hey, you probably got it, and you are a strong brother, but it's okay to go get help. And then we can probably turn it around.
Do you believe that admitting that you have some mental health issues or that you need some counseling can affect you professionally? Because there's a belief that if I make that admission, it's gonna affect my professional career.
No, we bound by HIPAA and certain other things. So I mean, no, it's not going to affect it because it's under the rights and protected, almost similar to if a person had AIDS or anything. You don't have to disclose that. You only can disclose it if you needed to for accommodations or something like that. So it's okay because a lot of people, and I'll be honest, and I'm qualified to say this, I do believe that we all got some issues.
Absolutely.
We all do. Now, some people cover it up better than others. Some people wear the suit better than others. Some people can hide behind better than others. But let's be real, brothers. I mean, we all dealing with something. And so going and get help, is a gift to yourself and helping to process what you probably hadn't processed or need to process so you wouldn't be carrying around that anger because, Mr. Allen, carrying that anger is just as bad. Because it manifests inside of you physically by having that anger inside of you. So
tell us how to get in touch with you, brother. Tell us how to reach out to you.
Well, I'm on all social media websites. I have an agency called JR Moore Associates. So you can go jrmooreassociates.com. Yeah, we have a platform called Brother Let's Talk, and this is going to be the kicker, brotherletstalk.com, and we offer free counseling service to men and boys. So you ain't got no excuse.
We're gonna make sure we put Brother Let's Talk in our worship folder, our worship magazine, so people can reach out if they need it. So look out, some folks will be giving you a call, and that's not just for. What about for women? Because we got to come and have some conversations about some women.
Yeah, we'll talk about women, but the Brother Let's Talk platform is specifically for men and boys to erase the stigma of the mental health services. So we want to break those barriers down where you don't have anything that's stopping you from getting the help that you need. And we have a network of mental health professionals, men and women. So when you get the appointment, we have a grant through the United Way that pays for it. So you'll actually have a real, true professional that you will go to. Brother Let's Talk or just pay for it. Up to 3 or 4, 6 sessions, depending on what's needed.
Dr. Moore, we appreciate you coming. I know we call this our XL edition because we go longer than before. So we appreciate the extra time you spent with us. It's been valuable, brother.
And I want to share one thing. I appreciate all you brothers. I appreciate any brother that's on there, that's on this thing, and I love you and make that comfortable. And it's people like myself that's here to help you. And you don't have to suffer in silence.
You should find something in your email if you haven't already from 45th Street. Thanking you for your time. We appreciate you so much.
No
we
problem.
look to get back together again next week in another edition of our Street Talk. We talk about wellness this month. I want to thank Deacon Langham for coming and being forthright and honest with us. I know he has some technical difficulties, but the Lord wanted him to be on here with us tonight. And I also want to thank Reverend Bristow for always being so supportive of everything. God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Moore. We'll see you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Blessings, everyone. Blessings.